I was having a magnificent year. The company I'd started just 3 years ago was winning all sorts of awards. We were on top of the world. So we decided to take a couple of well-earned holidays. We learnt to dive in a local dive centre, and we found ourselves in some exotic places like the Maldives. Then we took our first Christmas away from the family ever. We were in Sri Lanka. We had had a fantastic Christmas party the night before, put on by the people that owned the dive centre. And we'd stumbled up to bed in the early hours of the morning, promising that we'd meet everyone for a 9 o'clock dive. Well, we made it to breakfast. Then we decided to go back to bed and nurse our hangover. Later on, we heard this thudding, and I thought, great, we've picked a hotel that's doing building work. And we then could hear all this swishing, like water. We knew it was a beautiful day. So Stuart went to the window and he pulled back the curtain. And he said, I think you better come and look at this. I knew by the voice, the tone that he used, that something was up. So I shot out of bed and looked out the window. And from our 3rd floor hotel room, I looked down. Sea everywhere. The dive centre next door, its roof was being lifted up by the waves and carried away. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. The violation I felt was incredible. Everything I knew and had learnt about the seaside was wrong. There was no sloping beach down to the rippling waves. All of a sudden, it was all around us as far as the eye could see. We looked around the hotel and inland, and just water carrying buses and everything, just down the Gore Road like it was a river. It's incredible what your body does in that situation. Immediately I was sick, and the smell of this water was just incredible. Sewage, oil, diesel, death was vile. That relentless banging that we heard was a ship being banged into the side of the hotel. All of this swishing was the palm trees in the water. It was just too much to comprehend, and there was not a single person in sight. It was like the end of the world. I didn't understand what had happened. Was this a nuclear bomb that had gone off back in old Blighty? Was this the butterfly effect of that? I managed to get one text message out to my sister and to Stuart's sister, and it said, there's been a bit of a flood. But we're okay, because I just couldn't comprehend what it was. So it was the tsunami. I just want to put things into context for you. Does everyone know what this is? Let's imagine that the earthquake that released energy from the earth was measured in the equivalent of atomic bombs. How many atomic bombs do you think it might have been equivalent to? Normally people say 2, and I say more. They say 10, I say more. They say 20, and I go, keep going. So I'll put you out of your misery. The energy that was released from the Earth's crust that caused that earthquake was the equivalent to 28,000 Hiroshima bombs. Can you imagine that? Here's some stats. 30 kilometres underneath the sea floor. That's when a distance of 1,200 kilometres was shifted 20 metres. 20 metres. That's how much of the earth shifted, and it created the biggest natural disaster in our history. Almost 250,000 people lost their lives immediately. Almost 500,000 in total when you think about the related diseases. And the worst thing of it all, 1/3 of them were children. That was our hotel room, the one in the top corner. Can you imagine looking down and seeing nothing but sea? You see the dive centre roof here? That was being ripped off and carried away. It was just too much to understand. I don't know how long it was before we made it out of the hotel. We were half wading, half swimming. We were wearing the most sensible things we can find. Everything, all the trappings of the Western world, we left behind in our hotel room. It just had no currency anymore. The things that were important, the things we could barter with. We had no idea what was going on. We just knew that we needed to be clever about this. And then, again, some hours later, one of the dive centre manager's boys found us and forced marched us to Jimmy's house. Jimmy was a village elder, and he lived really high up on the hill. And we were reunited with some of our friends in his garden. So there were about 120, 150 of us in that garden, and that is where I spent the most valuable week of my life. The first thing that we did, even though we all spoke different languages and came from different cultures, is we came together. I remember we had one mobile phone, another mobile phone, another, none of them worked. We ended up patching together one phone, somebody else's SIM card, somebody else's battery, somebody else's power supply, and all of a sudden we had one working mobile phone. I then made sure that every single person in that garden got one phone call home to tell their loved ones that they were safe. In that garden during that week, I saw some incredible things. And what I learned about humans is that in the face of adversity, that's when we are at our greatest. Things that you don't realise are useful come into play. People became nurses, doctors, foragers, counsellors, entertainers, and you might not realise how important it is to keep your spirits up in that situation, but that role was as valuable as any other. Every single person had something valuable to bring to the party. I think one of the most important things that I remember is that it's when you put all of that talent together that you suddenly create true magnificence. And that's the most important thing. There's one particular story that I remember, and it was when the Sri Lankan people, one magnificent afternoon, these Sri Lankan men came back with a bag full of fish. They had a carrier bag full of fish that had been washed up, and they were cheering and everything, carrier bag full of fish. And you look at this garden full of 120, 150 people, and you're thinking, that's great, how's it going to go around? But do you know what? It did. We cooked it up, and we had these fish, and we had a handful of rice. So every single person in that garden was sated with a morsel of fish and a handful of rice. Now, there is something amazing about what happens to your body. It takes over in that situation. You find you don't need to sweat as much, drink as much, eat as much. You actually survive on an awful lot less than you think you will. But we were sated on that handful of fish and rice. And that reminds me of a much more famous story. What I realised is that human beings do have some brilliant things to bring to the party. But when you put it together, that's when you realise that we can be truly magnificent. And it is actually, it feels like a vibration. And I want you to remember something that happened to you where you would have felt this. A vibration, it feels incredible, and it spreads and spreads and spreads. And it didn't stop there. It was collaboration that got us home. It wasn't one government, one person. It was collaboration. That's what got us home. It was collaboration that made us put together that he could do a village fund and raise £100,000 in just 6 months flat. It wasn't us. It was the collaboration of everyone at home, doing tabletop sales, doing car boots, putting on concerts, doing coffee mornings. There was this incredible collaborative compassion that just consumed me and vibrated me from the heart. And I know that other people have felt that. It didn't stop there. 8.6 billion pounds was raised. Now that is more than £1 per person living on this planet. That's incredible. And that's what happened partly because no one was to blame for this natural disaster, and it reached people, it touched people. But I want you to just consider what can happen if we all put our resources together. What I saw at the core of humanity was empathy, it was compassion, it was love and forgiveness. There are so many stories that I could fold out from here, but I just don't have the time today. But it was amazing. Most of all, it was actually this collaboration that made a difference. Collaboration has the power to overcome everything. So why don't we think big? Why don't we stop sweating about the small stuff? Why don't we stop bitching and moaning and talking about politics and think deep, think big picture? It is in the face of true adversity that we really see how far we will shine. And I have great faith in humanity. We've talked a lot about artificial intelligence and the future, and there may be some fear. Some people might fear what their place is in the future. Where is my place in humanity? I have no such fear because I've seen a fraction of what we can do when we come together. And it is just incredible. We are far greater than the sum of our parts. Anyone here who has been through trauma will know what I'm talking about. Every time we hear a story about, I don't know, some tragic incident or some terrorist attack or something happening, we hear these tiny little snippets of stories about human magnificence, somebody doing heroic things, somebody putting somebody else's life before their own, somebody going the extra mile. And when you put all of that together, that's when you get this crescendo, this wonderful magnificence. And I've touched it, I've seen it, I know it exists. But you know what? We've never been tested. Nobody has ever tested humanity to that extent. But I know that if anything happened in the future and we had to come together as one race, we would. I don't just feel it, I don't just think it, I believe it, I know it, because I've seen a snippet of it, and I guarantee that you have too. This is what I want you to think about. Think about everything we've heard today. Think about how we are evolving as a human race. If we're talking about advancement, if we're talking about all of that kind of stuff, then think about us, the human race. Because we're on a magnificent journey, and there is so much that we can give and so much that we can do. We don't know how powerful we are. But just imagine, what if we put all of our stuff together? What could we possibly achieve? I can't tell you what it is, but the one thing I'm absolutely certain, it's going to be magnificent. Thank you.